Toronto has got pressure, right? They've got some big shoes to fill because if we look at the pieces that this team has lost, right? We talk about the transition from Splice now into the Toronto Ultra, from regular esport now into franchise esport. They have lost some big names. We talk about names like Jerd. We talk about names like Temp. Those are some heavy hitters, right? Those are names that franchises are now starting to build around. And I'm sure this team is aware of this, but they have to be prepared for the giants that exist on the other side, right? It's no surprise. We've seen these particular teams be announced over the last few weeks or so. Your Atlantas, your Chicagos, your LAs. These are teams that look like all-star teams, right? These are all-star type lineups that if they can flip the switch, can be incredibly difficult to take down. We talked about 100 Thieves, right? Initially couldn't make it work. They added a few pieces, instantly became what looked upon as the best team in Black Ops 4 for a short time, right? They finally managed to get what was necessary for them to reach the pinnacle, or what at their time was their best form. So if those teams can reach that level, it's going to come to a point where teams like Toronto have to say, okay, we've got to be prepared for this. We've got to be in a situation of which, hey, these teams are now performing at the level that they're expected to. We now have to answer that. And I will say, Toronto, I like the group they've put together, right? They've got Looney, Brack, Methods, Lucky, and Metals in their starting lineup. But this team will have to step up to the ranks, right? They're going to have to step up to the plate, if you will. Let's be real here for a moment. Not only can you play up to standards with other rosters or other players in your position, but with this team, you have to play better, right? This is the time to step up. Not a matter of, oh, well, as long as I play the same way that I did last year. No, it's not going to fly. If you realistically want to be a top 5 team in the CDL, you have to have players that are not just going to play to standards, but overperform. First player that I want to look at, and what I believe will be looked upon as eventually, if not already, their primary option, Brack. Right? Had a fantastic last season, despite all the adversity in what I would deem as one of the roughest rookie seasons I've ever witnessed, still managed to be consistent. Despite all the organizations, all the different players he played alongside, he still managed to be consistent. And I think he will be looked upon by Toronto to help lead this team in terms of slaying, in terms of putting up numbers. He drastically will need to answer the call and become a top player in this game. Not on the team, not on the day, not in the region, in the game. Because if he doesn't, this team is instantly going to feel the pressure and the lack thereof. And I do feel like Brack is going to be in a unique position with this team, right? Because if you look at other rookies from last season or guys who are coming into year 1, year 2 in terms of the CDL, Brack sits in a pretty interesting spot. Let's go and take a look at a few other guys who are in his same role, right? Simp, Abizi, Major Maniac, Celium, all together on Atlanta. Shotzi and Illy together in Dallas. Envoy, of course, a prior teammate of Brack. In Chicago with one of the scariest teams on paper, right? We have to talk about as well. What I notice from this list are players that if they struggle, there's still some known pieces they can rely on. I mean, hey, Simp has a bad game. Major Maniac has a bad game. Selling, the list goes on. They can rely on each other, right? Shotzi, Illy, they have a bad game. Hey, we can rely on each other. We can rely on Hook. We can rely on the vets. Envoy. Everyone on this lineup he can rely on for the most part. It starts, in my eyes, and it ends with Brack, right? They need him to be their star. And I think he needs to be a top 5 player in this game. But there are obviously players that can take that pressure off, right? It's not just Brack's team. And I'm not speaking as if he doesn't have options, but there are still questions, right? There are still questions. And one of those guys who I bring up in the midst of questions is Methods. Now, Methods didn't get a lot of love last year, right? Obviously translated for a few different teams for a majority of the year, played under UYU, which that organization struggled a lot throughout the season. They really couldn't get more than top 12 placements at LAN. They finished what would be last or top 16 in the Pro League. By no means the best year. But if you look at a year prior to that, and if you look at a game that a lot of people are comparing to Modern Warfare in World War II, Methods year, a totally different story. Methods came out and won championships in World War II, or rather a championship. He got first place in both CWL stages. He won CWL Atlanta. He was the MVP of that event while under Rise Nation and playing alongside Looney. He got an opportunity to play for Optic Gaming. He was a player who replaced the Dynasty. We know how that ended, but regardless, all in all, the opportunity, the achievements were far and away night and day different in comparison to World War II, to what we saw in Black Ops 4. Night and day. Winning championships to top 12 placements. Winning CWL stages to becoming the lowest tier team in the Pro League. Needless to say, we need World War II Methods back, and the Toronto Ultra, are going to need him now. If Methods can be that same stable, slow AR player and put up the numbers, put up and kind of have that same consistent performance, they're going to be in a good spot. And I will say, if you're a Toronto fan, right, if you are a Toronto Ultra fan, you're watching this lineup, you're hoping for a few things to go their way, what you are rooting for is a slower paced game. Right? Someone like Methods absolutely led the way last year, or rather the year before, in terms of World War II. He was by far a top player, and I know that in terms of stats, ARs were heavily kind of attributed to. Hey, that's fine, right? You're top up Methods and Brack. These could be your first two options, depending on how the game works. You're okay if the game is slow. I will say, let's go and move on. Next, you have the Heretics boys, right, of Metals and Lucky. This is an interesting venture, right? I know there were some people that were surprised by this move, and I don't think it's out of the question to be somewhat nervous on how these guys are going to perform. There was the idea that, hey, are these guys actually, whenever the rumors were out there in terms of how a few of the Heretics guys were kind of flying around, these two guys kind of got associated with Toronto. Many people thought, hey, are they going to be substitutes? Are they going to be starters? How's this really going to mesh, right? But when we talk about these guys in specific, right, we love their story. In Black Ops 4, everyone loved the surprise passion that we saw come through from Heretics. We loved the Vamos chants. The hype this team had when they qualified, the passion that they presented was incredible. There were times when people thought Heretics were a top 5 team and could push for even higher. Never have we seen before a Spanish team see this much success in Call of Duty Esports history. We had seen moments of greatness in years prior, but never at this same level. When they finally got their opportunity, they seized it, to say the least. We saw top 4 to top 8 placements throughout the middle of the season. Their best event was obviously at London, and we were happy with that. We were happy with the placements that they saw, and despite the closeout of the year, finishing 10th at playoffs, finishing top 16 at champs, all in all, it was a great year. We were fine with it. We said, you know what? In year 1 of all these guys finally playing in the CWL, we're cool with it. It's fine. But this year, however, it's different. For Metals and Lucky, previously it has been anticipation. What can these guys do? Can they win a tournament? Can they be consistent? Now it is expectation. Not only do we want these guys to help contribute and lead Toronto, but now we expect it. Because if not, you can assume what's going to happen. Like I said, this for me is where anticipation now meets expectation. They are now a necessity and must, for this team to succeed and hold very valuable positions, must be valuable on this roster. They need to contribute and be primary options. And finally, we've got Looney, right? I think for me, Looney is more than glue for this team. I think he holds it together and will be a very busy man come this season, if he isn't already, right? He's proven to be a great player. He's proven to be a fantastic leader. And now we'll meet a very, very tall task, which will be to make this team one of the best in the league, right? To make them a contender. He has to work on integrating these pieces together, right? Making all of the different pieces start to mesh, right? Integrating Lucky and Metals, who have no previous chemistry with anybody on this team. Work with Brack in his second year. Work with Methods on trying to get back to that same World War II form. And I think he's really going to need help from Methods in a lot of these positions as well. But I think that Toronto is really going to be relying on Looney specifically to keep this team together. And that, for me, will be the ultimate test. I think for me, Looney has almost, if you look at an individual from each roster in franchising, I think for me, Looney is one of the most important players for a team to see success. I think he brings everyone together. He's obviously the oldest. He is the veteran. He is the IGL when it comes down to this team, at least majority-wise. and he's going to be leading the fray for them, right? Doesn't play well, maybe can't get these pieces to mesh, we could start to see issues. But all of that starts to drive through someone like Looney. Now, Toronto also did announce 5 other players, right? They did announce their bench along with their starting roster at the launch party they had, in which that consists of Cammy, Kleenex, Mayhem, Classic, and Bance. I'll be honest, this is a pretty good mix of young talent and guys who have kind of been around the block for a while. One person who I especially have a spotlight on is going to be Kleenex, right? The way that he looked at CWL Champs was absolutely fantastic. He was lighting it up. He looked like there is something special about him, to the point where maybe in the future or maybe in the nearby, titles, he could be a top-level SMG player. We saw glimpses of greatness come through from his overall gameplay. And so this is going to be his kind of official rookie season, if you will, and hoping to see him be integrated in some capacity, because if he can be that same player that we saw for Singularity, it's going to be scary, especially if he comes in as a 6th man. Maybe he replaces one of the pieces, and then you have 7, 8 guys that you can really start to rely on consistently. And I think in terms of young players, I'm also excited to see someone like Cammy progress, right? He helped lead units to a top 6 placement at Champs. I've heard a lot of good things about him. And in terms of the, 10 players, I like that idea. I do. They're one of the teams who have kind of already gone out there and said, hey, we will have 10. There's some teams who are kind of on the fence as of right now about keeping the, typical 7. Obviously, the cap can start to become somewhat of a factor possibly for a few rosters out there. But I like the idea of having 10 players because you have the ability to work on strategy in-house, right? You have the ability to fine-tune things. We talked about how teams previously, they don't like to scrim, search, and destroy. Well, hey, now you can do that, right? Now you can work with guys who can almost study search and destroy. Guys can study different teams, different strategies, how you utilize different, nade spots, smoke spots, snipers, however you want to try to implement things. All of these guys can have the ability to make the starting 5 the best they possibly can, and maybe could be thrown into that fray from time to time. And I think if you can make this team basically, or rather make these players take a step back and say, you know what? We are a team, right? We are a group of 10 guys. We look at the giants that exist on the other side, and the way that we take them down is by everyone contributing, everyone coming together and putting in the best they possibly can. And if that requires subbing players out, bringing in guys for a map, bringing them in for a game mode, they really could squeeze all the talent that they have out of these 10 guys into making this lineup the best it possibly can be. Now, is that realistic? We'll have to see, right? We've never seen substitutes be utilized really ever before in Call of Duty Esports, and now the fact that you have 10 players, there's a lot of freedom there. There's a lot of possibility and potential that could exist there. So I think for me, there are a lot of what ifs, or if this happens, if this player can do this for me on this team. I like the direction of where they're going. I like the idea of having 10 players. But I think there are a lot of things that do need to go right. There are a lot of things that need to be kind of checked off in order for this team to really maybe reach the pinnacle of what they want, which is to be a contender. And I think you are going to need to see a lot of overachieving, I think, for this team to get, like I said, where they want to be. But I think Toronto, in my eyes, a lot of guys who have to step up to the plate if they really want to be in a good spot.